Monopoly was made to be unfair. It was made to show how bad capitalism was, so if you like the game, you're playing the game wrong. This is another video where I'm going to look at your views and opinions and questions from comments on my previous videos, and I'm going to give you my opinions on these comments and responses to any questions. So that was an example. There were a few similar examples to that one on my recent video about outdated game mechanisms. Let's take a little clip from the video. Monopoly. It had to crop up somewhere in this video, didn't it? You might be surprised that it took this long. So in Monopoly, if I land on this space, I draw a chance card. Let's take a look. You have been elected chairman of the board. Pay each player $50. Construction loan approved. Collect $150. Yeah, these are quite significant outcomes and they're very different. So what did the player do to deserve that reward or punishment? Nothing. They rolled a die and they did what it said. It is wildly unfair. Okay, so here's two more comments that were made under that video. So one said, wasn't Monopoly supposed to demonstrate the failings of capitalism? If so, mission accomplished. And another comment was, Monopoly was designed to be unfair. That's the point. I understand where these comments are coming from, okay? But I feel like it's a misunderstanding. There was a precursor to Monopoly, which was called The Landlord's Game by Elizabeth McGee, an American lady. And that precursor was specifically designed to educate, right? To educate about economic theory. And there were two different modes of play. So you could play that game, the Landlord's Game, competitively, or you could play an alternate set of rules called Prosperity, where the players played collaboratively. And you tried to get to the point where the player with the least money had doubled their money. And so then all players won together. So two very different ways, and it illustrated how capitalism works, and it illustrated how a very particular form of socialism works. Okay, and it contrasted the two. So the idea was that you would play both versions. And there was even within that rule set of the Landlord's Game, there was the option, if you fell really far behind and one player achieved a certain amount of money, so they were way ahead, there was an option for the remaining players to switch to the prosperity rules, where they now would play collaboratively, so they form a team to play against that winning player. So it was quite a sophisticated design, the Landlord's Game. There were many differences from Monopoly. In fact, practically every rule was a little bit different. You did have the board with the spaces around the outside with the different locations, and you did roll the die and see how far you would move, and then depending on where you landed, something would happen. And the theme was the same as Monopoly, owning properties and so on. But the properties were all divvied out at the start of the game. You didn't buy them as you went along. There were no auctions or anything like that. As you went, there are lots of different rule sets for the Landlord's Game. So I'm mixing up different editions and rule sets from various different patents and things like that. But at certain versions of them, you would go around and you would pick up wages on each individual turn. And then by the time you passed go, you would receive a certain number of a certain amount of wages based on the number of wage tickets that you had picked up throughout the game. There were things like go to jail, but the rules about getting out of jail were different. The railroads allowed you to move a certain number of spaces of your choice in one direction or the other, so you could move clockwise or anti-clockwise at certain stages in the game. And practically every other rule was slightly different as well. When you drew the cards, which were called So What cards in some editions, chance cards in other editions, those cards, which we would now know as chance and community chest, would change the rules for a period of the game until the next chance card was revealed. So they might change how you would pay taxes and things like this. So the game wasn't Monopoly, okay? So this game, which I think people have referred to quite a lot as Monopoly was supposed... I'm looking at my laptop here if I'm looking off screen. Monopoly was supposed to demonstrate the failing of capitalism, or it was supposed to show how capitalism works. That's not correct. Monopoly was not that. Monopoly was a very simplified game that was clearly inspired by the Landlord's Game, but it was almost like it was created by a man called Charles Darrow, and it's almost like he had played the Landlord's game, gone away, and then tried to remember it and made his own version. Okay, Monopoly is as different from the Landlord's game as Thunderstone is from Dominion or Ascension is from Dominion. It's like someone's tried to remember the rules to the Landlord's game and made their own version. It's very much simpler, and it's very focused on the fun. There's nothing in any of the marketing that I've ever seen around Monopoly which suggests that it's supposed to be an educational game in any way, or that it's supposed to illustrate anything around economics and so on. In fact, if I look, I've written out some notes here from the 1932 ad game edition of the Landlord's game. So within the rulebook, it says, this relates to the Landlord's game and prosperity rules. No dull moments, full of novel situations and swift surprises. Lots of fun, and you learn without painful effort. A study in economics. A thorough understanding of the mysteries of political economy comes with playing the Landlord's game and prosperity. So it's clear here that even Elizabeth McGee intended her game to be fun, right? So the comments that I've had saying Monopoly's not supposed to be fun, that's not true, is it? It is clearly supposed to be fun. Even Elizabeth McGee intended it to be learning while having fun, right? And it's also very clear that Elizabeth McGee intended you to play the capitalist rules and the socialist rules and compare and contrast to create an educational experience. It's not the case you're just supposed to play the Monopoly version, okay? So it's a different thing to Monopoly. If I look at a 1994 Parker Brother edition of Monopoly, in the rules, it credits the game to Charles Darrow, not to Elizabeth McGee, and we could argue that point, certainly. But it says, Mr. Darrow, like many other Americans, was unemployed at the time and often played this game to amuse himself and pass the time. It was the game's exciting promise of fame and fortune that initially prompted Darrow to produce this game on his own. So that's from the rulebook of Monopoly. And it clearly states that Mr. Darrow's intent here was to create something that was exciting, fame and fortune, and to amuse himself. There's nothing there to say he intended to create anything educational. So I totally understand where the comments are coming from about Monopoly being designed to be unfair or designed to teach us about economics and why capitalism is bad and how no one's supposed to have any fun playing Monopoly. But I don't agree. Okay, next comment, and it's very similar from the same video. And this one refers to an overview I gave of the game Parcheesi. In fact, let's look at another clip. So your job as a designer is to make sure that every player is having fun. Now that doesn't appear to have been a major consideration for the designers of Trouble, or Frustration, as it's known in the UK. This game is a modern implementation of the ancient Indian game Parcheesi, with the main innovation being the Pop-O-Matic dice flipping device. Parcheesi has been around for thousands of years, and in many versions you need to roll a certain result before you can even start playing the game. Inexplicably, this rule has survived the centuries and made it into Hasbro's implementation. Until you've rolled a 6, you can't play. And so the comment says, the game is called Frustration, what do you expect? And that really got me thinking, can you think of any other board games that make their selling point a negative experience? You know, I looked it up actually on Board Game Geek. Is there a game called Boredom? I was trying to think of what are negative experiences you could have playing a game. Turns out there is a board game called Boredom. I looked up Aggravation, and there is a game called Aggravation, although Aggravation does look like it's heavily inspired by Frustration. It looks like it's probably Frustration just reboxed and renamed. I don't see much, I mean, so clearly it's worked for Hasbro and previous publishers of this game, but I don't see much reason to call a game after a negative experience. You know, would we call a game Analysis Paralysis or Downtime, the board game? Probably not. I do recognise that in other countries, Parcheesi, or well, not so much Parcheesi, but modern versions of Parcheesi, modern versions of Ludo have got names like Menschage dich nicht, which do translate to, I'm not going to give you an accurate German translation, but they're things like don't get upset, aren't they? Don't get annoyed. So clearly they are selling the game on its frustrating gameplay. So when the viewer here says this game is called Frustration, what do you expect? It got me thinking, what do I expect from a board game? And I don't expect a negative experience. Even if it's called frustration, I sort of think that's going to be ironic. I think frustration is probably still sold on the basis that it's going to be fun, even though it's called frustration, right? Yeah, there's going to be frustrating moments, but the overall experience is going to be positive, right? That's the intention, I would imagine. I know there are games that could create other emotions, might be able to make you feel sad or feel scared or educate you in some way. So I fully recognise that not every game has to make you feel fun. But I doubt most of us who are creating games which we want to hit the market aren't looking to give negative experiences. And I don't think frustration is either, despite its title. Next up then is another one taking issue with my description of a game. So I'll just play a very brief clip from the video and then we'll come to the comment. Verflixt, otherwise known as That's Life, is the perfect example of a roll and move game which is packed with interesting decisions. It's one of my favourite games. Formula D, Nautilion, Deep Sea Adventure, Monza and Camel Up all use roll and move in engaging ways. Now this will be a controversial statement for many in the hobby, but I'd like to see more roll and move games released. It's time to reclaim this mechanism and bring it up to date. So the comment says, Camel Up is not roll and move. Roll and move is specifically about the player rolling and then moving their own piece representing their position. Camel Up is more similar to something like the bird feeder in Wingspan, a neutral form of randomness that players make decisions around rather than being dictated to, and the mechanism is, in theory, even for all players. Now I have some sympathy for this point of view. I'm not sure it's right, but I have some sympathy for it. Roll and move, as it is commonly used, when we talk about roll and move games, we're usually talking about games like Monopoly, aren't we? Where you roll the die and then you move as many spaces. Or Frustration, you roll the die and you move as many spaces as it shows. And that isn't the case in Camel Up. In Camel Up, you might choose to roll the dice, but those dice move the camels around the track and you don't own any of those camels. You place bets on them and where they're going to end up. So we're moving neutral pieces with the die rolls, not our own playing piece. We're not dictated to by the dice rolls. We make decisions based around them. And I recognise that that is not what everybody understands when they hear the term roll and move. They're thinking of those mass market games. Roll and move as a descriptor describes what happens in Camel Up very well. You roll the die, you move. Okay, so it describes it very well. But so does worker placement describe Carcassonne. And we know Carcassonne isn't a worker placement game, right? In Carcassonne, you place a tile, you put a worker on it. It's worker placement, but it's clearly not, because we have a definition of worker placement which specifically talks about taking actions and reserving those spaces and making it more difficult for people to access those spaces based on the workers that are on them and so on. I've got a whole video about worker placement. So roll and move, does it work in the same way as worker placement? Do we say, well, roll and move is not a literal description, it's a category of game, and we go with the common usage of it being about those mass market things? We don't have authorities on game design mechanisms and definitions, but we do have the Board Game Geek website, and that is a central hub for board gamers worldwide, and it does have a definition of roll and move on there, and the definition on Board Game Geek would certainly include Camel Up. It doesn't say anything about you only being able to move your own playing piece, a specific piece that belongs to you. And Camel Up is listed as a roll and move game on Board Game Geek. And the Board Game Geek definition is taken from Engelstein and Shalev's authoritative text, if we can call anything authoritative, which we probably shouldn't, Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design, which is a fantastic book for anybody who's interested in game mechanisms. So I could see a time where we start to limit roll and move to just talking about those games that we see in the mass market. But that's not how I'm seeing it used online. So for now, I'm happy to include Camel Up as a variant on the roll and move mechanism. But I am sympathetic to the viewpoint. The next comment is about a different video, which was about how trick-taking games work. So let's have a quick look at that video. Now, trick-taking games are the most ancient form of card games, dating back to the 10th century in China. And they're the most common games that you would play with a traditional deck of playing cards. So they include games like Whist and Hearts and Contract Bridge and Euchre. These are all trick-taking card games that have been played a lot over the last few centuries. Now, I'm not going to focus particularly on the traditional games, and this isn't truly a top 10 trick-taking games. This is a top 10 style of trick-taking games, top 10 different mechanisms used in trick-taking games, and specifically in modern trick-taking games. And the question is, what exactly does trick mean here? Why does it feel that trick is a noun? This naming is annoying. And I get where they're coming from. It is a bit annoying that it's called a trick, because a trick would be, well, it could be a magic trick. It could be like a scam, couldn't it? Or a prank. But in this case, trick is an archaic word, right? It's an ancient word going back to the 17th century, I think, where a trick means a hand of cards. Okay, so when we're talking about trick taking, that's the sense in which we use it. But actually, it's not called a trick in other countries. In Germany, it's called Stick. So there's a freedom and freeze game called Stickmeister, and there's a very good trick-taking game that's very popular called Stickeln. So stick is more related to prick or pinch, I think. And so you see in Stickeln, there's all sorts of pictures of a porcupine with spikes and with a little sword, you know, and injection needles and things. It's all very needly and pricky, okay, because that's what trick is called. It's got the same sort of name as a prick or a sting. So words have different meanings, right? You can have the same word and it can mean multiple different things. There's loads of examples of that in the English language. So yes, while trick can mean a magic trick and it can mean a prank, it can also mean a hand of cards, and in this case it means a round of play in a trick-taking game where we're playing one card each and then we see which card won. That's essentially what a trick-taking game is, and obviously there's additions that have been placed onto that over the years about following suit or trumps and so on, and the highest card winning, but that's not the case in every trick-taking game. Essentially a trick-taking game is we each play a single card and then we see which card wins and that player takes the cards. That's basically a trick-taking game. But the video I made shows it in a lot more detail and gives you a much clearer definition than I just have. Okay, next comment relates to my video Self-Sabotage and Board Game Design. And you sat watching the monitor as the project launched, eagerly awaiting the influx of customers over that first hour. Your partner watched with you. Despite a difficult first play, they had developed a fondness for the game. And after several hours had passed, you decided to call it a day. There had been no big influx. It was apparent this was going to be a bit more challenging than expected, but there was still plenty of time and a lot to play for. You slept fitfully. You were disappointed that the following days showed little improvement. You posted daily updates, a positive sheen to a somewhat grim picture, expressing huge gratitude to the committed, enthusiastic backers, gritted teeth as you expressed huge optimism for the project. 28 days later, the campaign closed as it had begun, a failure. You look at your shelf of games, boxes which used to bring you such joy, but now they served only as a reminder that other designers have it better than you. They're luckier, they're richer, they're better connected. You don't need them, you have your own game, and the world is missing out. And the comment says, the gaming universe is organised into 3 distinct layers. Those who play games and have fun, those who design games, which is not always so much fun apparently, and those who decide which game designs are good enough to launch to the broad market. I think it's fair to say that the board game could be broken down into those categories, although I think if you're going to say it's gamers, players, designers and publishers, which is essentially what they're saying, we could also add in manufacturers and distributors and retailers and reviewers and sculptors and artists and graphic designers and all sorts of others, right? So the industry is a little bit more broad than that. The thing that I found a little bit odd about this comment is that it implies that the people playing games are having fun, the designers are having no fun, and then there's these publishers who get to dictate what everybody gets to play. And I'm not sure that that's true. If you're a designer and you're not having fun, don't do it. Oh my word, don't do it. You don't make enough money to make it worth designing games if it's not fun, right? It's not a stable career. It's not something people go into and think, oh, well, I'm tied down to this now. This is my career. I'm stuck with it for the rest of my life. I mean, if you're in that situation, then I'm sorry, because game design is not very stable. You're designing games usually because you're having fun doing it. And yes, there are stressful moments, and I talk about a lot of those on this video. I try to be very candid and open and honest on this channel about my experiences, including the negative experiences, bad reviews, bad sales, disagreements with designers or disagreements with publishers. All that sort of stuff is stressful, right? But I wouldn't do it if it wasn't for the fact that the overwhelming feeling around game design is that it's really, really fun. And for me, it's more fun than playing games. Designing games is immense fun. And publishers, I don't think they're really dictating to us what we get to play, particularly in a world where Kickstarter's out there and anybody can self-publish games. So if you want to make something, you could get it out there. The publishers are dictated to by the players, the market, right? What do people want? The publishers are making that stuff because that's the stuff that sells. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship, I think, rather than this dichotomy that the commenter sort of makes between publishers and players. It's symbiotic. They rely on each other and they inform each other. But everyone's having fun, or if they're not, they should get out of the industry. The next comment relates to this book, actually. It comes from a video I made about this book, which was called Your Path to Success as a Board Game Designer. That was the name of the video. I'll show you a quick clip from the video. So first off, you are a game designer. None of this wannabe stuff. It can't be repeated enough. This isn't an exclusive club. If you design games, you're a designer. And if you're a designer, you're going to love what I have to show you today. This is the Adam in Wales Board Game Designer Journal. This book is packed with reflective tools to help guide you towards success, however you define it. Now, it's not a playtesting journal. That is to say, the journal is not focused on one specific game or project. It's focused on you. You are the project. So the comment was, it's one of those unpleasant comments you sometimes get on YouTube. You might be a game designer, but those games are bad designs. Also, thanks for the ad for a book which won't ever help anyone, I guess. You meet some charming people on the internet, don't you? I hope that that's not the case. Well, I know that it's not the case, frankly. I know that my games aren't bad designs. They'll be bad for some people won't enjoy them, and they're certainly flawed designs, as I think pretty much every game is to some degree. A book that won't ever help anyone? Okay. Maybe that's true, but I've got a lot of positive reviews, so I'm defending myself a little bit here as well. So here's an Amazon review relating to the book. I've been watching Adam's videos on YouTube for a few years now. Every time I think he's helped me out with my board game designs in every way possible, he creates something new to prove otherwise. So that was a really nice comment to receive. I had a comment on my video designing board games on a budget. And the commenter said, 2 years ago I started watching your videos when I tried to publish my first game. Without spending a single cent, I've now kickstarted that game and 2 more. Your videos have changed how I approach game design and inspired me so much. I mean, that's really, really rewarding, reading comments like this. And this is why in my videos I frequently say, please do comment. Please let me know what you think of my videos, what you think of the ideas, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Okay, I don't mind receiving the negative reviews. Sometimes it can give me a little bit of a knock, but usually I just go back and read the positive ones and try and give it a little bit of context and a little bit of balance. There's another one here from Your Game Design Opinions and Insights, my previous video actually in this series where I did something similar and looked at game design opinions and insights. And this one says, Adam, I really enjoy your videos. They're all top-notch and among the best on board game design. Your strength lies in creating high-quality content that helps people understand good designs and great board games. It might be worth considering focusing more on your YouTube channel rather than making board games, at least in my eyes. Really nice comment, and it did get me thinking. I don't think I'm going to focus more on the YouTube channel and move away from the board game design. To me, the two things really, for me personally, they go very much hand in hand. I think I would struggle to do one without the other. That said, I do have less and less time to devote to either of them, hence making videos like this which are unscripted and less edited than some of my previous videos. I got good feedback on my last 2 videos which have been unscripted in this way. So I'm hoping that this new format isn't, you know, putting people off, and I'm sure I'll go back to creating some scripted videos again soon when I have a little bit more time. But there's a whole other world that, you know, I work as a dentist and as an educator, a dental educator. I've got a family, I've got all this other stuff in my life that isn't board game design related, and ultimately this is kind of a sideline, right? So I don't think I'm going to reduce my my board game design output to increase my YouTube output. I think one of the big strengths actually of my YouTube channel, personally I feel like, is that I'm not pursuing this as a career. Okay, my YouTube channel has started to generate me a little bit of income through ad revenue and through sponsorship. Okay, so I do make a little bit of money from these videos, and of course I use them to advertise my journal, as I have done in this video. I talk about my journal, hopefully in a useful, constructive way rather than just shoving it down your throats. So it does make me a little bit of money, but this is by no means a career, and it never will be for me. That's not what I'm pursuing. That's why I'm not asking you all to pitch in for Patreons and Kickstarters and so on. I'm not saying I'll never do that. We'll see what happens, but for now that really isn't part of my plan. So hopefully I just keep ticking over, making games from time to time, making YouTube videos as and when I can, and I hope that's enough for all of you, and I can manage the balance because it gives me a balanced life, frankly. So this video, I've answered a few of your comments. I feel like I've disagreed with quite a lot of them in this video, hopefully in a friendly, constructive way. Please do come back and watch more of my videos. If you want to see another video like this, follow the link.